Dr. Hana Kim pressed her face against the cold window of the transport ship and watched the strange purple world grow larger below them. Planet Keth Prime looked nothing like Earth. Purple grass covered rolling hills, and tall silver trees reached toward 3 different colored suns in the sky. She had been waiting for this moment for 6 months. "First time seeing an alien world up close?" asked Dr. Tawali from the seat behind her. His voice carried that same know-it-all tone that had annoyed her since they started working together. "On Research Station Omega-7, not my first," Hana replied without turning around. "But every new world still makes me feel like a child seeing magic for the first time." "Well, don't get too excited," Tewu said with a laugh. "From what our scouts reported, these Villani creatures are pretty basic. They live in simple caves, and seem to spend most of their time just sitting around their crystal formations. Probably not much more intelligent than Earth dolphins." Hana finally turned to look at him. "The initial reports also said they have some kind of group communication system. That usually means higher intelligence than we first think. Or it could just be like dancing," Tewu shrugged. "Simple patterns for simple needs. Food, danger, mating, nothing complex." The transport ship shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Captain Juno Park's voice came through the speakers from the pilot cabin. "Landing in 10 minutes, team. Remember, this is just a basic survey mission. We observe, we record, we don't interfere. The Galactic Coalition wants a full report before they decide how to handle first contact." Hana gathered her equipment bags and checked her recording devices one more time. As the station's lead xenobiologist, she would be responsible for the first detailed study of the Villani species. The early drone footage had shown creatures with beautiful crystal-like skin that seemed to change colors in the light. They walked on 2 legs like humans but were taller and thinner. Most interesting of all, they seemed to live in perfect harmony with their environment. The ship touched down in a clearing near what appeared to be a Villani settlement. Through the window, Hana could see several of the creatures watching their ship from a safe distance. Even from far away, she could tell they were not afraid. They seemed curious, almost welcoming. "Atmospheric readings are good," Captain Park announced. "Air is breathable for humans, though a bit thin. Temperature is comfortable. You can remove your helmets once you're outside." Hana was the first one down the ship's ramp. The moment her feet touched the purple grass, she felt something strange. It was like a gentle humming in the back of her mind, so soft she almost missed it. She looked around for the source but saw nothing obvious. "Probably just nerves," she whispered to herself. The Villani creatures approached slowly. Up close, they were even more beautiful than the drone footage had shown. Their skin wasn't just crystal-like. It actually seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that shifted from deep blue to bright green to warm gold as they moved. They were about 7 feet tall with long, graceful arms and legs. Their faces were almost human-like, but with large, dark eyes that seemed to hold deep intelligence. One of them stepped forward from the group. This one's crystal skin showed more purple and silver than the others. When it spoke, the sound was like wind chimes mixed with a human voice. "Welcome, sky travelers. We have been watching your metal bird and wondering about your purpose here." Tewu's mouth fell open. "They speak English?" Not English, Hana realized, fascination growing in her voice. "They're communicating directly with our minds somehow. We're hearing our own language, but they're probably hearing theirs." The lead Villani tilted its head, studying Hana with those large, dark eyes. "You understand more than your companion." "Interesting. I'm called Keth. I speak for my people in matters concerning visitors." "I'm Dr. Hana Kim," she replied, taking a careful step forward. "We're researchers from the human species. We come in peace to learn about your world and your people." Keth's crystal skin shifted to warmer colors. "Learning is good. We welcome those who seek knowledge with respect." For the next several hours, Hana and her team observed the Villani settlement. What they saw challenged everything the initial reports had suggested. The creatures didn't live in simple caves. They lived in complex structures that seemed to be grown rather than built, made from the same crystal material as their skin. These buildings hummed with energy and seemed to respond to the Villani's presence. The crystal formations Taewoo had dismissed weren't just decorations. They were clearly some kind of technology, though unlike anything humans had ever developed. When Villani touched them, information seemed to flow between the crystals and their minds. It was like a biological computer network. "This is incredible," Hannah whispered into her recorder. "The Villani have integrated their technology with their biology in ways we never imagined possible. Their entire civilization seems to be based on some kind of living crystal matrix." "Don't get carried away," Taewoo warned. "Just because something looks advanced doesn't mean it actually is. Bees make complex hives too, but they're still just following instinct." But Hannah wasn't listening to him anymore. She was watching Keth demonstrate something to a group of younger Villani. He touched one of the larger crystals, and suddenly images appeared in the air above it. Not projected images like human holograms, but actual three-dimensional pictures that seemed to be made of light itself. The images showed the history of their world. Hannah saw vast cities that once covered the planet, technologies that could reshape matter itself, and spacefaring vessels that moved between stars. But she also saw great destruction, wars that nearly tore their world apart, and finally a choice to abandon their old ways and live simply. "Keth," she called softly, "may I ask about what you're showing them?" Keth turned to her, and for a moment she felt that strange humming in her mind grow stronger. It was like he was trying to share something with her directly. "We teach our young about the paths that led us here, about choices made and consequences accepted. Your species is young and eager like we once were, but eagerness without wisdom can lead to great pain." "Are you saying your people were once more technologically advanced?" "Advanced in ways that nearly destroyed us," Keth replied, his skin shifting to darker, sadder colors. "We chose a different path, but the knowledge remains, sleeping in our crystals and in our memories." That night, back at their temporary camp, Hannah tried to explain what she had observed to Captain Park over the communication link to their station. "Captain, I think we're dealing with a species far more sophisticated than our initial reports," suggested. "They have technology that appears to be based on biological crystal matrices. Their social structure seems highly organized, and their leader, Keth, has implied they have a complex history of technological development." Captain Park's voice crackled through the speaker. "Dr. Kim, I need facts, not speculation. The Coalition is sending a delegation in 2 weeks for first contact. They need clear information about threat levels and resource potential." "That's just it, Captain. I don't think we can assess either of those things with a simple survey. The Villani are clearly intelligent, possibly more so than we initially thought. Any decisions about this world should involve proper diplomatic contact, not just resource evaluation." "Dr. Kim," the captain's voice carried a warning tone, "your job is to study their biology and behavior, not to make policy recommendations. Stick to the science." After the communication ended, Taewoo shook his head at her. "Hannah, you're getting too emotionally involved. They're fascinating creatures, I'll give you that, but you're reading things into their behavior that probably aren't there. That light show could have been just instinctive behavior like bird migration patterns." But Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. That night, as she tried to sleep, she kept thinking about the way Keth had looked at her, as if he was trying to tell her something crucial that she wasn't ready to understand. The humming in her mind had grown stronger throughout the day, and now it was almost like a gentle song. She had never experienced anything like it. Tomorrow she would ask Keth about it directly. Something told her that understanding that connection might be the key to understanding everything else about his people. As she drifted off to sleep under the light of 3 alien moons, Hannah had no idea that her growing bond with Keth would soon change the fate of entire civilizations. The next morning, Hannah woke up with the gentle humming still in her mind. It was stronger now, like a soft melody that never stopped playing. She found herself humming along with it as she prepared her equipment for another day of studying the Villani. "You're in a good mood," Taewoo observed as they walked toward the Villani settlement. Sleep well under the alien stars? Actually, yes, Hannah replied, surprised by how rested she felt. Better than I have in months. When they reached the settlement, Keth was waiting for them. His crystal skin showed warm gold and green colors that seemed to pulse gently with the rhythm Hannah heard in her mind. Good morning, Dr. Hannah Kim, Keth said, his voice like singing crystals. I hope our world song did not disturb your rest. Hannah stopped walking. Song? You mean the humming I've been hearing? Taewoo looked between them with confusion. What humming? I don't hear anything. Keth's large dark eyes focused on Hannah with what seemed like surprise. You hear the deep song? That is unusual for one who is not Villani. What does it mean? Hannah asked, stepping closer to him. It means you have the gift of listening with more than your ears, Keth replied. Very few beings from other worlds can hear what flows between us. It is how we share thoughts, feelings, and knowledge across great distances. Taewoo crossed his arms. So it's like a radio frequency? Some kind of biological transmission system? Not radio, Keth said patiently. It is connection of minds and hearts. What you might call telepathy, though that word does not capture the full meaning. Over the following days, Hannah spent more time with Keth while Taewoo focused on studying other aspects of Villani society. She discovered that her ability to hear their mental song was growing stronger. Soon she could pick up basic emotions and even simple thoughts from the Villani around her. This is incredible, she told Keth during one of their walks through the crystal gardens. I can feel what your people are feeling. Happiness, curiosity, peace. It's like experiencing emotions in color. Your mind is very open, Keth explained, his skin shifting to soft blues that matched his calm mood. Most visitors from other worlds cannot make this connection, no matter how long they stay with us. Why me? Hannah asked. Keth was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a sadness that made her chest ache. Perhaps because you truly wish to understand us, not just study us like interesting rocks. That comment stayed with Hannah for the rest of the day. She realized that Keth was right. Taewoo and even Captain Park approached the Villani like a scientific puzzle to be solved. But for her, they had become something more personal. She genuinely cared about them as individuals. On the 5th day of their visit, Keth took her to a part of the settlement she had never seen before. Deep underground, beneath the crystal buildings, lay a vast network of caverns filled with the largest crystals she had ever seen. These weren't just beautiful formations. They were clearly technology, of some kind, humming with power that made the air itself seem alive. What is this place? Hannah whispered, afraid to speak too loudly in such a sacred feeling space. This is our memory chamber, Keth replied. Here we keep the knowledge of all that we have been and all that we have chosen not to be. As they walked deeper into the caverns, Hannah began to see images in the crystals themselves. Not reflections, but actual scenes playing out like movies inside the living stone. She saw the Villani as they once were, with technology that could reshape entire planets and ships that traveled between galaxies in the blink of an eye. Your people were spacefaring, she breathed. You had an interstellar civilization. We did, Keth confirmed, his skin taking on darker, more serious colors. We spread across many worlds, always reaching for more knowledge, more power, more control over the universe around us. What happened? Why did you give it up? Keth touched one of the larger crystals, and suddenly Hannah was experiencing the memories directly through their mental connection. She saw wars that lasted for centuries, weapons that could destroy entire star systems, and the slow death of worlds as the Villani's endless expansion consumed everything in its path. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Keth said softly. And we nearly destroyed many other species in our hunger for more. In the end, our wisest leaders made a choice. We would give up our old ways and live simply, in harmony with the natural world. But you kept the knowledge, Hannah realized, still overwhelmed by the visions she had seen. Knowledge cannot be truly destroyed, only hidden. We keep it here so that future generations will remember the price of unchecked ambition. As they made their way back to the surface, Hana felt a growing sense of urgency. Keth, there's something I need to tell you. The Galactic Coalition is sending a delegation here soon. They want to establish formal contact with your people. Keth's skin shifted to worried yellows and oranges. What kind of contact? I'm not sure, Hana admitted. But I know they're interested in your world's resources. The crystals, the rare minerals. They'll want to set up mining operations? Mining? Keth stopped walking, his colors becoming agitated reds and purples. They cannot mine our crystals. They are not just stones. They are alive, connected to every Villani on this world. To damage them would be like cutting pieces from our souls. I'll try to explain that in my report, Hana promised. But I need you to help me understand. How exactly are you connected to these crystals? Keth was quiet for a long time. Finally, he reached out and touched her hand. The moment their skin made contact, Hana felt the full force of the Villani connection. It was like being plugged into a vast network of consciousness that spanned the entire planet. Every Villani was connected to every other through the crystal matrix, sharing thoughts, emotions, and life force itself. But there was something else in that connection. Something that made her heart race with fear. The crystals weren't just keeping the Villani connected to each other. They were keeping something else contained. Some deeper part of their nature that felt dangerous and wild. What was that? She gasped, pulling her hand away. That was why we chose to live as we do, Keth replied sadly. The crystals do not just connect us, they help us control what we once were. Without them, we would return to our old nature, the nature that nearly destroyed the galaxy. That night, Hana tried to include everything she had learned in her daily report to Captain Park. She explained about the Villani's telepathic abilities, their advanced history, and most importantly, their deep connection to the planet's crystal formations. Captain, it is absolutely critical that any mining operations avoid the major crystal networks. The Villani are biologically dependent on these formations. Disrupting them could cause serious harm to their entire species. Captain Park's response came back quickly and was not what she wanted to hear. Dr. Kim, I'm concerned about your objectivity. Your reports are becoming increasingly emotional rather than scientific. The Coalition's preliminary survey shows massive deposits of rare crystals that could power human colonies for generations. A few primitive aliens cannot be allowed to block access to such vital resources. They're not primitive, Hana argued. Captain, if you could see what I've seen, understand what they really are, ... What I understand is that you're getting too attached to your subjects, the captain interrupted. Dr. Lee has expressed similar concerns about your behavior. Perhaps it's time to rotate you back to the station. The communication ended, leaving Hana staring at the blank screen. She looked around the camp and saw Tae-woo watching her from across the clearing. His expression told her everything she needed to know. He had been reporting on her behavior to Captain Park. Having trouble with command? Tae-woo asked, walking over to her. Just trying to make sure they understand the situation, Hana replied. Carefully, Hana, I've been watching you these past few days. You're spending too much time with that creature Keth. You're starting to act like you think they're human or something. They're not human, Hana said firmly. They're something much more complex than we first thought. And if the Coalition tries to mine their crystals without understanding the consequences will be that humanity gets access to energy sources that could change our entire civilization, Tae-woo interrupted. A few aliens' feelings can't be more important than that. That night, as Hana lay in her sleeping bag listening to the crystal song in her mind, she realized that she was completely alone in understanding what the Villani really were. Worse, she was beginning to understand that her own people might be about to make a mistake. That could have terrible consequences for everyone involved. The humming in her mind had grown so strong that it felt like Keth was lying right beside her, sharing her worries and fears. Somehow, she knew he was feeling the same growing dread about what was coming. The question was whether there was anything either of them could do to stop it. 3 days later, The coalition delegation arrived on Keth Prime in ships that made Hana's research vessel look like a child's toy. The massive carriers landed with enough force to shake the ground for miles around, their metal hulls gleaming against the purple sky like silver mountains. Prime Speaker Thane emerged from the lead ship wearing ceremonial robes that sparkled with embedded technology. Behind him came dozens of officials, scientists, and military personnel. Commander Voss, a tall man with cold eyes and a permanent frown, seemed more interested in the planet's defensive capabilities than its beauty. Captain Park had arrived the day before to oversee the first contact proceedings. She had confined Hana to the research camp, claiming her emotional attachment to the Villani made her unsuitable for diplomatic events. "This is the most important moment in human-Villani relations," Captain Park had explained. "We cannot risk any unprofessional behavior disrupting the process." So Hana could only watch from a distance as the coalition delegation marched toward the Villani settlement. Her heart ached as she saw Keth and the other Villani emerge to greet their visitors. Even from far away, she could see that Keth's crystal skin was showing nervous colors, shifting rapidly between pale blues and worried yellows. The formal first contact ceremony lasted for hours. Through her growing telepathic connection, Hana could feel Keth's confusion and growing distress as Prime Speaker Thane explained the coalition's intentions. The delegation spoke of friendship and mutual benefit, but their real interest was obvious. They wanted access to the planet's crystal formations for mining. The crystals on your world could provide clean energy for millions of human colonies, Prime Speaker Thane declared through a translation device. In exchange, we offer protection, technology, and trade opportunities that will bring your people into the modern galactic community. What the coalition delegation didn't understand was that Hana could hear Keth's thoughts through their connection. She felt his horror as he realized these visitors saw his people as primitive obstacles to valuable resources. That evening, despite Captain Park's orders, Hana snuck out of the research camp and made her way to the Villani settlement. She had to warn Keth about what she had discovered in the coalition's private communications. She found him sitting alone in the crystal gardens, his skin a deep, sad purple that made her heart break. "Keth," she whispered, approaching carefully. "I had to come. There's something you need to know." He looked up at her with those large, dark eyes that seemed to hold all the sorrow in the universe. "I already know, Dr. Hana Kim. Your people see us as you might see insects living on something they want to dig up." "Not all of us," Hana said firmly, sitting beside him on the crystal bench. "I've been monitoring their communications." "Prime Speaker Thane has already classified your people as a Class C species? That means they consider you intelligent but not advanced enough to have equal rights in negotiations." Keth's color shifted to angry reds. "They think we are children who can be tricked with shiny toys." "It's worse than that," Hana continued, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I discovered something in their encrypted files. The Coalition has been testing biological weapons designed to weaken species that resist their mining operations. Keth, I think they might try to use something like that here if your people refuse to cooperate." The crystal formations around them began to hum, more loudly, responding to Keth's emotional distress. Through their mental connection, Hana felt his shock and growing fear. "Biological weapons," he repeated slowly. "They would poison us to steal our crystals." "I don't have proof yet," Hana admitted. "But the research files I found suggest they've done this before on other worlds. They introduce diseases that weaken local populations, then offer medical aid in exchange for mining rights." Keth stood up suddenly, his skin flashing through rapid color changes that Hana had never seen before. For a moment she felt something dangerous flowing through their connection, something old and powerful that made her survival instincts scream. "Warnings, Keth," she said carefully. "What was that feeling just now?" He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "That was the memory of what my people once were. What we could become again if we chose to defend ourselves as our ancestors did." "The memories you showed me in the crystal chambers," Hana realized. "Your people weren't just advanced. You were warriors." "We were destroyers," Keth corrected her. We conquered worlds, enslaved species, and burned entire solar systems when they opposed us. That is why we chose to live as we do now, to never again become what we once were." They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in the weight of what they were facing. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "There might be another way. If I can get evidence of the Coalition's illegal biological weapon research, I can expose them to the Galactic Council. Force them to back down. And if you cannot get this evidence?" Hannah didn't have an answer for that question. The next morning, Hannah was arrested. She had barely returned to the research camp when Captain Park and 2 Coalition security officers were waiting for her. "Dr. Hannah Kim," Captain Park announced formally. "You are under arrest for violation of First Contact protocols, unauthorized communication with alien species during sensitive negotiations, and suspected treason against human interests." "Treason?" Hannah gasped. "For trying to prevent a potential genocide? For spreading false accusations against Coalition leadership and attempting to sabotage legitimate resource negotiations," Commander Voss said coldly as he stepped out from behind the security officers. "Dr. Lee reported your increasingly erratic behavior and paranoid theories about biological weapons." Hannah turned to look at Taewoo, who was standing nearby with guilt written all over his face. "You told them about my research into their files?" "I told them you were becoming dangerously obsessed with these creatures," Taewoo replied, not meeting her eyes. "Hannah, you broke into classified Coalition databases. You're talking about conspiracy theories and genocide. Can't you see how that sounds?" "It sounds like someone trying to prevent innocent people from being murdered," Hannah shot back. "Innocent?" Commander Voss laughed harshly. "These are primitive aliens sitting on resources that could power human civilization for centuries. Their inconvenience cannot be allowed to block human progress." As the security officers placed restraints on her wrists, Hannah felt Keth's distress through their mental connection. Somehow, he was aware of what was happening to her. They locked her in a holding cell aboard one of the Coalition ships. Through the small window, she could see the Villani settlement in the distance. The crystal formations seemed dimmer now, as if they were reflecting the growing sadness of their inhabitants. Hours passed before anyone came to see her. When the cell door finally opened, it was Prime Speaker Thane himself, accompanied by Commander Voss. "Dr. Kim," Prime Speaker Thane said with false kindness, "I understand you have concerns about our negotiations with the Villani. Perhaps we can discuss them." "My concerns are about the biological weapons research I found in your classified files," Hannah said directly. Prime Speaker Thane's expression didn't change, but Commander Voss stepped forward with anger in his eyes. "Careful, Doctor," Voss warned. "Accusations like that could be considered acts of war against the Coalition itself. So you don't deny it?" "I deny nothing because there is nothing to deny," Prime Speaker Thane replied smoothly. "However, I am curious about these telepathic abilities you seem to have developed. Our scientists would very much like to study this phenomenon." Hannah felt ice form in her stomach. They weren't just planning to mine the crystals. They wanted to experiment on her connection with Keth. "The Villani are not test subjects," she said firmly. "Everything in this system belongs to the Coalition now," Commander Voss said with a cruel smile, "including any humans who have been contaminated by alien influences." That night, alone in her cell, Hannah pressed her mind against the bars of her mental connection with Keth. She had to warn him about what was coming. The Coalition wasn't just planning to mine the crystals. They were planning to use both her and the Villani as experimental subjects. But when she reached for Keth through their telepathic bond, what she found terrified her. His mind was filled with ancient memories stirring to life. Memories of weapons that could crack planets and ships that moved faster than light. The peaceful being she had fallen in love with was struggling against the awakening of something far more dangerous. Through their connection, she felt his love for her mixing with rage at her imprisonment. And beneath both emotions, something else was stirring. Something that had been sleeping in the Villani collective consciousness for thousands of years, something that the Coalition's actions were about to awaken. The Coalition research facility was built in just 2 days. Hannah watched from her cell window as massive machines carved into the hillside near the largest crystal formation. The Villani had protested, but Commander Voss had simply ignored them. To him, they were no different from animals complaining about construction noise. On the third day, they brought Keth to the facility as a prisoner. Hannah felt his capture through their mental connection like a physical blow to her chest. The pain and confusion flowing from his mind made her cry out loud, enough that the guards came to check on her. The alien is being brought in for standard medical examination. One guard explained when she demanded to know what was happening. Nothing for you to worry about. But Hannah knew it was much more than a medical exam. Through her telepathic bond with Keth, she could feel everything they were doing to him. The needles drawing his blood, the machines scanning his crystal skin, the electrical probes testing his nervous system. Each procedure sent waves of agony through their shared connection. Dr. Wei Sung, the Coalition's lead researcher, was fascinated by Keth's biology. Hannah could hear him talking to his assistants through the facility's communication system. Remarkable, Dr. Sung said as he examined tissue samples. The crystal formations are not just growing on his skin. They are integrated into his entire nervous system. It's like his body is part biological organism and part living computer. What about the telepathic abilities? Asked one of his assistants. Even more interesting. The crystals seem to act as biological transmitters and receivers. But there's something else here. Something dormant in his genetic structure that I've never seen before. Hannah pressed her hands against the cell window, wishing she could reach Keth through more than just their mental link. She could feel his pain, but she could also feel something else building inside him, something that frightened her. Keth, she whispered, trying to send calming thoughts through their connection. Stay strong. Don't let them break you. But his response was unlike anything she had felt from him before. Instead of his usual gentle warmth, there was heat, anger, and beneath that, something much more dangerous stirring to life. The breakthrough came on the 5th day of testing. Dr. Sung had been trying to understand how the crystal formations connected Keth to other Villani across the planet. To test this, he began introducing various chemicals into Keth's system to see how they affected the telepathic signals. Try the neural inhibitor compound, Dr. Sung ordered his assistant. Let's see what happens when we block the connection. Temporarily, the moment the chemical entered Keth's bloodstream, Hannah felt their mental bond twist with pain. But worse than the pain was what came after. As the inhibitor tried to shut down Keth's telepathic abilities, it began interacting with something else in his biology. Something that had been locked away for thousands of years. Through their connection, Hannah suddenly found herself experiencing memories that were not Keth's own. Ancient memories that belonged to his entire species. She saw the Villani as they once were before they chose the path of peace. Towering warriors in crystal armor that could withstand the heat of stars. Ships that could travel between galaxies in moments. Weapons that could reshape the fabric of space itself. But most terrifying of all, she felt the rage that had driven them to conquer world after world. The burning need to dominate everything they encountered. The joy they had once taken in destruction. And war. Stop, she screamed, pounding on her cell door. You don't understand what you're doing. You have to stop the experiment. But no one was listening to her. In the research lab, Dr. Sung was watching his instruments with growing excitement. Incredible. The neural inhibitor is causing massive changes in his genetic expression. Dormant DNA sequences are activating. It's like his entire biological structure is transforming. What Dr. Sung didn't understand was that the Villani had deliberately modified their own genetics thousands of years ago. They had locked away their warrior nature behind telepathic controls that connected them to the planet's crystal network. The network didn't just allow communication. It kept their ancient destructive instincts suppressed. By blocking Keth's connection to that network, the Coalition scientists were accidentally removing the only thing that kept him from reverting to what his species once was. Elder Myra contacted Hannah. That night, through the crystal network that still connected to her cell, the old Villani's mental voice was filled with terror. Dr. Hana Kim, Elder Myra said through their telepathic link. What your people are doing to Keth is awakening something that should remain sleeping forever. I've been trying to warn them. Hannah replied through her thoughts. But they think I'm making up stories. What exactly is happening to him? Long ago, when our people were young and foolish, we were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed any species that opposed us. The Crystal Network was our greatest creation, but we used it for war, not peace. Through the connection, Elder Myra shared memories that made Hana's blood run cold. She saw Villani battle fleets that could move through solid matter, weapons that could cause suns to explode, and warriors who could survive in the vacuum of space using only their crystal armor. When we finally understood the horror of what we had become, Elder Myra continued, our wisest leaders made a choice. We would change our own genetics to suppress the warrior nature. The Crystal Network would help us maintain that suppression, generation after generation. But what happens if that suppression is removed? Hannah asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Then we become what we once were. But Keth is different from the rest of us. His bond with you has changed him in ways we do not understand. If he awakens fully while believing you have been harmed, his rage will spread through the entire network. Every Villani on this world will transform. Hannah felt sick with horror. The Coalition scientists thought they were studying a primitive alien. Instead, they were accidentally creating the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. How do I stop it? She asked desperately. You may be the only one who can, Elder Myra replied. Your connection with Keth is stronger than anything we have seen before. If you can reach him before the transformation is complete, you might be able to help him remember who he chose to become instead of what he was born to be. They won't let me near him. Then you must find another way. Because if Keth awakens as a warrior while in the hands of those who would hurt you, nothing in this galaxy will be able to stop what follows. The next morning, Hannah watched through her cell window as Coalition mining ships began extracting crystals from the largest formation near the Villani settlement. She could feel the pain this caused every Villani on the planet as their shared network was damaged, but worse than their pain was what she felt from Keth. With each crystal that was removed, another piece of the ancient suppression system failed. The warrior programming buried in his genetics grew stronger. Through their bond, she could feel him changing. His gentle nature was being overwhelmed by instincts that had been bred for conquest and destruction. Soon, he would no longer be the being she had fallen in love with. He would become something that could tear apart entire civilizations without mercy, and when that happened, she realized with growing terror, the first thing he would do would be to come for her. Not to rescue her, but to avenge what he would see as her betrayal by her own species. The Coalition had no idea that their prisoner was becoming the most dangerous force in the galaxy, and they had no idea that their treatment of both him and Hannah was about to trigger a war that could destroy everything they had ever known. Commander Voss grew tired of Keth's resistance to questioning on the seventh day. The Villani had endured every test and procedure in silence, his large dark eyes showing no fear even as the experiments grew more painful and invasive. This creature is too stubborn, Voss complained to Dr. Sung. We need to break his spirit if we want useful information about their technology. What do you suggest? Dr. Sung asked, looking up from his analysis of Keth's blood samples. Psychological pressure? Voss replied with a cold smile. These aliens seem to have formed emotional attachments. Let's use that against them. Hannah had no warning of what was coming. Guards dragged her from her cell and forced her into the main laboratory where Keth was strapped to an examination table. His crystal skin had changed since she last saw him. Instead of the gentle colors she remembered, dark reds and purples swirled across his surface like angry storm clouds. Keth, she gasped, seeing the pain in his eyes. He turned his head toward her, and for a moment she felt the full force of his mental anguish through their connection. But there was something else there, too. Something that made her step back in fear. The gentle being she loved was still there, but something much more dangerous was awakening alongside him. "How touching," Commander Voss said mockingly. "Dr. Kim, your alien friend has been very uncooperative. Perhaps you can convince him to be more helpful." "He's not my property," Hannah said angrily. "You can't torture him into giving you what you want." "Torture?" Voss laughed. "We're conducting scientific research. But since you seem so concerned about his welfare, let me show you what happens to humans who betray their own species for alien." "Sympathies?" Voss nodded to one of his guards, who raised a weapon and pointed it at Hannah's head. "No," Keth said, speaking aloud for the first time since his capture. His voice had changed. It was deeper now, with an edge that seemed to cut through the air itself. "Ah, so you can speak when motivated," Voss said with satisfaction. "Tell us about your people's crystal technology and your human friend lives." "But—" Instead of answering, something began happening to Keth that none of the humans in the room understood. The restraints holding him to the table started to crack as his body began changing. His crystal skin grew brighter and harder, forming natural armor plates. His muscles expanded and his fingers lengthened into claws that could cut through metal. "Fascinating," Dr. Sung whispered, completely missing the danger they were all in. "His entire biological structure is transforming at the genetic level." Hannah felt the change through their mental connection like an explosion of heat and power. But worse than the physical transformation was what was happening to Keth's mind. The gentle personality she knew was being overwhelmed by something ancient and terrible. Memories of conquest and destruction that belonged to his entire species were flooding through him. "Keth," she called desperately, "remember who you chose to be. Remember the peace your people found." For a moment, his eyes focused on her with recognition. But then Commander Voss made a fatal mistake. "Enough of this," Voss snarled, frustrated by the delay. He gestured to his guard. "Kill the human. Maybe that will make this creature more cooperative." The guard pulled the trigger. The energy blast struck Hannah in the chest, and she collapsed to the floor. The weapon was set to stun, not kill, but Keth's damaged telepathic abilities couldn't tell the difference. Through their disrupted connection, all he could sense was her pain and then sudden silence. To Keth, it seemed like the human he loved had just been murdered in front of him. The sound that came from his throat was not something any human had ever heard before. It was part scream, part roar, and part harmonic vibration that shattered every piece of glass in the laboratory. The restraints holding him exploded into fragments as his transformation completed itself. What stood up from the examination table was no longer the peaceful being Hannah had befriended. It was a Villani warrior from the ancient times, covered in crystal armor that seemed to absorb and redirect energy. With claws that could cut through any known material, Dr. Sung had just enough time to whisper, "Impossible," before Keth's clawed. Hand passed through his chest like he was made of paper. Commander Voss tried to run, but Keth moved faster than human eyes could follow. One moment the commander was at the door, the next he was hanging in the air, held by a crystal-armored hand around his throat. "You killed her," Keth said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the walls vibrate. "You killed the only human who understood us." "She's not dead," Voss choked out. The weapon was set to stun, but Keth was beyond reasoning. The ancient warrior programming in his genetics had fully awakened, and it knew only one response to the apparent death of something precious. Total destruction of everything responsible. He crushed Voss like an insect and turned his attention to the laboratory itself. With movements too fast to track, he began tearing apart every machine, every computer, every piece of coalition technology in the facility. But the destruction was just beginning. Through the crystal network that connected every Villani on the planet, Keth's rage and transformation began spreading to his people. Across the world, peaceful crystal farmers and philosophers suddenly found ancient memories flooding their minds. Genetic locks that had kept them passive for thousands of years shattered as Keth's awakening triggered a planet-wide reversion. In the Villani settlements, beings who had never known violence began changing as their bodies remembered what they once were. Crystal armor formed across their skin. Claws grew from their fingers. Most importantly, their minds filled with the knowledge of technologies they had deliberately forgotten. Deep beneath the planet's surface, massive structures that had been dormant for millennia began humming to life. Ships that were part organic, part crystal, and part something beyond human understanding started emerging from underground chambers. These were not the simple vessels of a peaceful species. These were warships designed by a race that had once conquered galaxies on research. Station Omega-7, Captain Park received the first panicked reports from the surface. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're getting emergency signals from the research facility." The transmission cut out after someone screamed about the alien breaking free. "Send a security team down immediately," Captain Park ordered, but before the security team could even launch, new contacts appeared on their sensors. Ships were rising from the planet's surface. Not primitive vessels, but craft that moved in ways that defied every law of physics the humans understood. "Captain," the sensor operator said with fear in his voice, "those ships, they're not showing up on our long-range scanners until they're almost on top of us. It's like they're moving through space itself differently than our ships do." The first Villani warship to reach orbit moved past the research station without seeming to notice it. But the second one stopped and turned toward them with predatory grace. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. The voice that came through their speakers was Keth's, but transformed by rage and ancient authority. "Humans of the metal nest in the sky," he said, each word carrying harmonics that made their equipment spark. "You have killed the one who spoke for peace between our kinds. There will be no mercy. There will be no negotiation. There will be only the justice that your actions have earned." "We can explain," Captain Park began desperately, but the transmission had already ended. A moment later, weapons that humans had no names for began tearing Research Station Omega-7 apart. The station's shields, designed to withstand anything, in the human arsenal, lasted less than 3 seconds against Villani war technology. As Captain Park and her crew died in the vacuum of space, more Villani ships were emerging from the planet. Ships that could travel faster than light without using hyperspace, that could phase through solid matter, and that carried weapons capable of cracking planets. The peaceful species that the Coalition had dismissed as primitive was revealing itself to be the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. And at the center of it all was Keth, no longer the gentle being who had fallen in love with a human scientist, but a warrior prince whose rage was about to reshape the political structure of known space. The worst part was that this was only the beginning. As news of the attack spread through Coalition space, other Villani worlds that had been hiding their true nature for thousands of years began awakening as well. An entire civilization of warriors was remembering what they once were, and they were very, very angry about how the galaxy had been treating them during their long, peaceful sleep. The Villani war fleet that emerged from Keth Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 47 ships that seemed to be grown rather than built, each one capable of moving through dimensions that human science couldn't even detect. Within 6 hours, they had destroyed every Coalition vessel in the Kepler system, but Keth was not satisfied with local destruction. Through the ancient crystal network that connected Villani worlds across the galaxy, his rage spread like wildfire. On distant planets where his people had been living peacefully for centuries, the same transformation began. Gentle farmers and artists suddenly remembered they were descendants of the greatest warriors in galactic history. Admiral Sunya Choi watched the reports flood in from her command ship near Earth. 12 Coalition fleets had been destroyed in 3 days. Entire star systems were going dark as Villani forces swept through them like an unstoppable tide. "How many ships do they have?" she asked her intelligence officer. "We don't know, ma'am. Our long-range sensors can't track them properly. They seem to move through folded space in ways we don't understand. What we do know is that every attack follows the same pattern. They target Coalition facilities and ships, but they ignore civilian populations that aren't associated with the Coalition government. So this isn't random destruction? They're hunting us specifically." "Yes, ma'am." And Admiral, there's something else. We've been monitoring their communications. They keep mentioning someone called the Human who spoke for peace. It seems their leader. This Keth creature believes we killed someone important to him. Admiral Choi studied the tactical display, showing the approaching Villani fleet. In another 12 hours, they would reach Earth itself. Nothing in the human arsenal could stop them. "Get me a direct communication link to their flagship," she ordered. "Ma'am, our previous attempts to negotiate have been ignored." "Try again." And this time mention Dr. Hannah Kim by name. Meanwhile, on the ruins of the research facility on Keth Prime, Hannah was slowly regaining consciousness. The stun blast had left her unconscious for 3 days, and she woke to a world transformed by war. The crystal formations around her were now humming with intense energy, their light casting strange shadows across the destroyed Coalition equipment. But most shocking of all was Keth himself. He stood at the center of the main crystal chamber, no longer the gentle being she had befriended. His crystal armor gleamed with power, and his eyes held the cold intelligence of an ancient warrior. "Keth," she whispered, struggling to sit up. He turned toward her, and for a moment she saw recognition flicker in his eyes. But it was buried beneath layers of rage and the genetic programming of his warrior ancestors. "You are awake," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the crystals around them sing in response. "Good. You should witness the justice your species has earned." "Justice?" Hannah got to her feet unsteadily. "Keth, what have you done?" "What needed to be done. The humans who murdered you have been punished. Their fleets burn in the void. Soon, their homeworld will share the same fate." "They didn't murder me," Hannah said desperately. "I'm alive." "The weapon was set to stun, not kill?" Keth's armor flickered, with changing colors, showing his internal conflict. "You were silent. I felt your pain and then nothing. The connection we shared went dark. Because the experiments they did on you damaged our telepathic link," Hannah explained, stepping closer to him. "You couldn't sense me properly anymore." "But I was never dead. I've been unconscious for 3 days." For the first time since his transformation, uncertainty appeared in Keth's eyes. Through their slowly healing mental connection, Hannah could feel him struggling between his current warrior nature and the memories of who he used to be. "If you were not killed," he said slowly, "then my rage was built on a false belief." "Yes," Hannah said softly. "And now thousands of people are dying because of that mistake." Admiral Choi's communication reached them at that moment. The main crystal formation lit up with her image as the Villani network intercepted and translated the transmission. "To the Villani leader called Keth," Admiral Choi's voice echoed through the chamber. "We have discovered the truth about Dr. Hannah Kim. She was not killed as you believe. She is alive on your world. I request immediate negotiations to prevent further bloodshed." Keth stared at the image of the human admiral, his armor shifting through rapid color changes that showed his mental turmoil. Around him, the crystal network was carrying his emotional state to every Villani ship in the galaxy, causing confusion in their coordinated attack. "You see," Hannah said gently, "I'm alive. Your people don't need to destroy the galaxy for my sake." But Keth's transformation was too complete to simply reverse. The ancient warrior programming that had awakened in him was designed for total victory, not peaceful resolution. "Even if you live," he said, his voice heavy with internal conflict, "your people still tortured me, still planned to mine our sacred crystals, still treated us as lesser beings to be exploited." "You're right," Hannah admitted. "Some of my people did terrible things. But not all humans are like Commander Voss or Prime Speaker Thane. There are many who would have stood with me if they had known the truth." Through their mental connection, she began sharing her memories with him. Not just her time with the Villani, but her entire life. Her childhood dreams of meeting alien species in peace. Her years of study dedicated to understanding other forms of life. Her growing love for him and his people. But most importantly, she shared her memories of other humans. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to protecting endangered species. Doctors who traveled to distant worlds to help anyone in need, regardless of species. Teachers who dreamed of a galaxy where all intelligent beings could learn from each other. "This is who we can be," she told him through their shared thoughts. "Not perfect, but capable of growth, capable of learning from our mistakes." Keth's armor began to shift back toward the gentler colors she remembered. For the first time since his transformation, she felt the being she loved struggling to reassert himself over the ancient warrior programming. "But the damage is done," he said sadly. "My rage has awakened every Vellani world in the galaxy. They are no longer the peaceful people we chose to become. They are warriors again, and warriors do not easily return to peace." "Then help me stop them," Hannah said, taking his armored hand in her smaller human one. "Show them that the human they thought was dead is alive and asking for mercy." Keth looked at their joined hands for a long moment. Slowly, his crystal armor began to recede, revealing the more familiar form she remembered. "You asked me to choose? Love over vengeance?" he said quietly. "I ask you to choose the future over the past," Hannah replied. "Your people spent thousands of years learning to be more than warriors. Don't let my apparent death destroy everything they built." With visible effort, Keth reached out through the crystal network to his people across the galaxy. His message was simple but carried the full weight of his emotional transformation. "A human who spoke for peace still lives. The war ends now." The response was immediate. Vellani ships throughout Coalition space suddenly stopped their attacks. Some continued to circle threateningly around human worlds, but the active shooting war came to an abrupt halt. Admiral Choi's voice came through the crystal network again. "We are prepared to discuss new terms for human-Vellani relations. Terms that acknowledge your people as equals and respect your sovereignty over your worlds." "And what of those responsible for the crimes against my people?" Keth asked. "Prime Speaker Thane and his inner circle are being arrested for unauthorized biological warfare research and violations of interspecies law," Admiral Choi replied. "The coalition government is being restructured to prevent such abuses in the future." Hannah felt relief flow through their mental connection, but she also sensed Keth's ongoing struggle. The transformation he had undergone couldn't be completely reversed. He was no longer purely the peaceful being she had first met, but something new. Someone who carried both the wisdom of his people's peaceful path and the strength of their warrior heritage. "The galaxy has changed forever," Keth said to her as they watched the first human diplomatic ships approach their world. "My people can never fully return to what we were before." "Maybe that's not entirely bad," Hannah replied thoughtfully. "Maybe the galaxy needs protectors who understand both the value of peace and the cost of war." "And what of us?" Keth asked, his eyes searching. Her face, "I am not the same being you fell in love with." Hannah smiled and reached up to touch his crystal cheek. "Love isn't about staying the same. It's about growing together, even when that growth is painful and difficult." As the new era of human-Vellani relations began, one thing became clear to every species in the galaxy: humanity's capacity for emotional bonds that transcended species lines was both their greatest strength and potentially their most dangerous trait. Those bonds could inspire incredible acts of sacrifice and cooperation, but threatening them could unleash consequences that no military force in the galaxy was prepared to handle. The final message broadcast across all known space was simple but profound. Humanity forms connections that cannot be broken by distance, time, or even death. These bonds make them capable of both extraordinary compassion and terrible vengeance. Choose wisely how you treat the humans among you, for they will remember both kindness and cruelty long after the stars themselves have forgotten. In the end, the galaxy learned that underestimating human emotional bonds was not just unwise, it was potentially catastrophic. And in the crystal gardens of Keth Prime, a human scientist and an alien warrior continued to prove that love could indeed be stronger than the programming of genetics, the weight of history, and even the fury of war itself.